Hey guys, we've got 2 classes left to go, so we can finish up your class for you. Sorry about the coronavirus, nothing we can do about any of that. We're going to try to get these last 2 lessons up on video and then arrange, I think Angela wants to have you guys come in, maybe it's going to be 1 at a time or 1 or 2 at a time, and get your final 25 sticks in if we can do it. So let's get started. We'll get this thing done. All right, I am in the small book today. Got 2 lessons left, and we're going to talk today about the heart and circulation. Before we get started with that though, let's talk about veins and arteries. The veins, you all know, take blood back to the heart, deoxygenated blood, while the arteries take blood away from the heart, oxygenated blood, oxygen-rich blood. The structure of these two, of the veins and the arteries, are very similar, and I've got on the board behind me their structure, how they're structured, and we're going to talk, I'll stand up here in just a minute, we'll talk about which does what. But before we do that, let's just go through, and I'm just going to go through the book so you can follow along, some basic definitions. When the heart is working, it's contracting and it's relaxing. When it contracts, it sends blood out through the arteries to all of your cells, and then it relaxes. Blood, which is deoxygenated, returns to the heart by way of the veins, and the process starts over. It's very basic, very simple. So let's just go through some vocabulary. Systole, up there at the top of the page in your book, is nothing more than contraction of the heart. So when you do a blood pressure, you've got one number above another number, is the way it's reported. That top number is the maximum pressure in your system when the heart contracts, systole. So that is called your systolic blood pressure, SBP. The lower number in your blood pressure is when the heart is relaxing, minimum pressure, diastole. So the lower number is your diastolic blood pressure, SBP, DBP. And when the heart is contracting and relaxing, that is your cardiac cycle. And we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But right now all we're doing is going through some vocabulary so we're all on the same page. So systole is when the heart's contracting. Diastole is when the heart is relaxing. And the cardiac cycle is simply the combination of the contractions and the relaxations. All right. So if we talk about the heart, it consists of 3 layers. You've got the endocardium, and we're going to go from the inner to the outer layers of the heart. 3 layers. Endocardium is the innermost layer. What's significant about the innermost layer is that it comprises the heart valves. Without the valves, you wouldn't have blood moving through the heart in the proper direction. It gets sloshed back and forth. Myocardium is the muscle. Of course, anytime you hear that prefix myo, it refers to muscle. So myocardium is your cardiac muscle. That is what is damaged when you have a heart attack from lack of oxygen. If you damage your myocardium, your heart muscle, well then you're not going to have proper contractions. That means you're not going to have proper blood flow from the heart to the body. And then the 3rd layer coming out is the epicardium. This is a thin mucus producing layer around the heart. The reason it produces mucus is for lubrication, because your heart is one of the few parts in your body that actually moves as it's functioning. Your hearts move, your lungs move, your heart moves, as they are performing their functions. Most of your body parts don't move. And then surrounding all of that, surrounding the entire heart, is the pericardium, and that is a fluid-filled sac whose job it is to buffer the movement of the heart. It's like the shock absorber. As the heart beats within the body, it's moving, and to buffer that movement so you really don't feel it, you're not aware of it, you've got the pericardium filled with fluid, and it also muffles the sound of your heart. So those are the three layers of the heart, from the interior to the exterior, the endocardium, the myocardium, and the epicardium, and then surrounding all of that is the pericardium. If you have a situation or an illness called pericarditis, that is infection of that fluid within the pericardium. It's a serious situation. All right, so let's then take a look at the valves, or the veins and the arteries, and I've got that up here on the board, so let me show that to you. We have three structures, inside to out, tunica intima. In the artery, there are no valves. In the vein, there are valves. The reason you have valves is because of the tunica intima, just like in the heart. You have valves, they keep the blood moving in one direction. You need valves in your veins because veins are low pressure, and given the opportunity, blood can reverse and move in the wrong direction instead of continuing toward the heart. In the arteries, because that is high pressure, you don't have to have valves. The pumping action of the heart keeps the blood moving in one direction. The tunica media, the middle layer of both the artery and the vein, is muscle. That muscle can be directed by the brain to contract or to relax to help maintain blood pressure. If the brain senses very high blood pressure, then it will relax the muscle and allow the vessel to enlarge, thereby dropping the blood pressure, and vice versa. And then the tunica adventitia, the outermost layer in the artery, is a rather rigid layer because it is intended to keep that artery open. It's critical that the artery remains open so that you have oxygenated blood moving to all of your cells. In the vein, it's a very fibrous, tough layer because the veins are very close to the surface of the skin, and they need to be supple because they get bumped and bruised and banged around all the time, but they very rarely break because they are very tough and fibrous. The arteries, because they're deeper in the body, don't need as much protection. You've got muscle, skin, tissue over them, which protects them. So those are the three layers of your vasculature, the artery and the veins. And just like the heart, three layers. It's a closed system, so you would expect that all three structures would have three layers. All right, so some more terms, and then we'll get to the structure, or the structures of the heart, and then the blood flow through the heart. And all of that stuff you need to know if you plan on taking the national exam. So first though, some definitions. Circulation. The circulation is nothing more than the movement of the blood through the heart. That is called cardiac circulation. Also, the movement of the blood through the vessels, the veins and the arteries. That is systemic circulation. Next term, follow along in your books, respiration. Now everybody thinks they understand what respiration means. Breathe in, breathe out, respiration. Well, that's not the case. If you breathe in, that's called inhalation. When you breathe out, it's called exhalation. respiration is actually the chemical exchange for the oxygen and carbon dioxide in your lungs. It's a chemical process, you can't see it. It's a word we use very often and don't really stop to think about what it actually is. But respiration is the chemical exchange for oxygen and carbon dioxide in the lungs. You can't see it, but we just typically call respirations the inhalation and exhalation of air and carbon dioxide from the body. And then the heart, you all know what your heart is. 4 chambers, I'll draw that up on the board in just a minute. So what do all of those things have to do with each other? Circulation, respiration, and the heart. Well, you don't have circulation without the beating of the heart. Without the beating of the heart, the push of the blood, you don't have blood going to the lungs so that you can in fact have respiration, the exchange of carbon dioxide for oxygen in the lungs. Keeps you alive. Pretty necessary. All right, so make sure you understand the difference in circulation, respiration, and then the purpose of the heart in reference to those two. Keep in mind, respiration is the chemical exchange of oxygen for CO2 in the lungs. All right, so let's then take a look at the heart and see how circulation occurs through the heart. Give me 1 minute here. I'll try to make this big so you can all see it. I know this is not the best camera work, but we're trying. All right, I'm going to draw the heart as a box. I'm going to make it big. And it's a box with 4 compartments. On the top, you've got the right atrium, and you have the left atrium, together called the atria. On the lower part of the heart, you have the right ventricle, and you have the left ventricle. Pretty simple, 4 chambers, upper and lower chambers. Between the chambers, you have valves, which are one-way valves, keeps the blood moving in one direction. So the blood coming from the body, deoxygenated blood, arrives and this is very simplified to make it easily understood, into the right atrium by way of the vena cava. You have the superior vena cava, bringing blood from the upper part of the body, from the head, the neck, and the shoulders. And you have the inferior vena cava, bringing blood from the rest of the body. Moves into the right atrium. At exactly the same time, you have blood coming from the lungs oxygenated blood into the left atrium. These structures can only fill with blood because they're relaxed. Immediately prior to the blood flowing into those chambers, the blood in the lower chambers was expelled from the heart. So as the upper chambers are relaxing, the lower chambers are contracting, and we'll follow that through. So over here on the right side of the heart, you have the blood coming in from the body. It's oxygen deficient When this chamber contracts, it moves down through the one-way valve into the right ventricle in preparation for leaving the body. When that right ventricle contracts, it's going to push that blood up to the lungs for oxygenation, respiration. While all of this is happening, at the same time, on the upper level, the blood that was previously oxygenated in the lungs has moved into the left atrium. So when these two chambers contract, they're pushing deoxygenated and oxygenated blood into the lower chambers. When these chambers are empty, these valves will close. The lower chambers will contract at the same time. The right ventricle pushing blood to the lungs. The left ventricle pushing blood out through the aorta, the largest artery, to the body, oxygenated blood. From the pressure of the heart contracting, blood is pushed through the system, comes back up. At the same time, it leaves the lungs, flows down into the ventricles, valves close, lower chambers contract, push blood to the heart, blood to the lungs, blood to the body. Next contraction, blood fills, moves down, this contracts, these relax, they begin filling, blood circulates. That is cardiac circulation. Simply the blood movement through the heart, tracing the blood movement. Remember that term, cardiac circulation. Cardiac cycle is simply while the upper chambers are contracting, the lower chambers are relaxing to accept that blood. When the blood is transferred, the lower chambers will contract and the upper chambers will relax. So you have contraction, relaxation, contraction, relaxation. They're never all relaxing or all contracting at the same time. Upper chambers and lower chambers are always the opposite. If these are relaxing and filling, these are contracting, pushing out the blood that just filled them, and vice versa. So that's cardiac circulation. Movement through cardiac cycle, relaxing, contracting, contracting, relaxing. The sound you hear when you listen to your heartbeat, bump, 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 that is actually the sound of these valves, which are open as the blood flows through, and then as these contract, it slams that shut. It's pushed back up so the blood can't regurgitate, and what you're actually hearing is the slamming of the valves. You can't hear them open, but you can hear them slamming shut. You hear them very muffled because you're hearing them through tissue and bone and muscle, and it filters out all of that high frequency sound. So that's the movement of the blood through the heart. Pretty simple. But refer to your big book, look at the picture of the heart, pay attention to the vena cava, the flow of the blood through the chambers, and then the flow of the blood out of the heart by way of the pulmonary artery and the aorta. Okay? All right. And this is a short section, so we'll get through this pretty quickly. All right, so what about the structures? We talked about the arteries and the veins. If you follow the arteries down from the big structure coming off of the heart, the aorta, as it moves down into the body, it branches outward, and those smaller arteries are called arterioles. those branch out even farther and finer to feed all of the cells of your body, and those are called capillaries. Veins are the same way. Now, as the blood moves through those arterial capillaries, at some point, those capillaries will become venous capillaries because the blood will be moving back to the heart. Those small venous capillaries will then become venules, and then as they consolidate, moving up toward the heart, then they become what's called veins. The biggest vein in the body is the vena cava. Biggest artery in the body is the aorta, which sits right on top of the heart. All right, so a little bit about the hematology of the blood. If you're looking in your big book, there's a picture of a test tube that shows how the blood settles out, and you'll note the plasma, which is the clear or clear to yellowish colored fluid, and the buffy coat, which is white blood cells and platelets, and then the erythrocytes on the bottom, which are nothing more than red blood cells. So another name for red blood cell is erythrocyte, and since it's sitting on the bottom of the tube, you would probably guess they are the largest and heaviest elements in the blood, and you'd be right. So red blood cells have a lifespan of about 120 days, and then they're replaced. Your body's consistently replacing and replenishing those. Red blood cells primarily are responsible for carrying oxygen throughout your blood. How do they pick up the oxygen? In the lungs, through the process of respiration. The white blood cells are intended to keep you well. For a lot of sick people right now, their white blood cells are working overtime, trying to protect them and save them from the coronavirus. That's what they do. Since this is a new virus, the white blood cells may not know what to do with that viral particle. It seems that some people have the ability to adapt and do well, and some people don't. But we've yet to see what the outcome of that will be. So, all right, and then platelets, another portion of your blood, the hematology of the blood. Those are just cell fragments that are related and necessary for coagulation. So your first line of defense if you're bleeding is platelet aggregation. They start sticking together and they form a little clot to stop the blood. So those are the basic elements of your blood.